All right, gang. So today we're going to talk about World War I, and over the next couple of days we're going to talk about World War I. Today we're going to talk about the beginnings of the war and how it began and the causes and the initial fighting. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about the more long-term things, or major events rather, and then we'll talk about long-term consequences after that. Well, first of all, standard World History 10, the student will demonstrate a knowledge of the worldwide impact of the First World War by doing the following. We're going to talk about the causes, the events, and the major leaders, including Woodrow Wilson and Kaiser William II of Germany, rather. Okay, then we're also going to look at the Treaty of Versailles. We're going to go into a lot of detail onto Versailles and look at how it really negatively affected the world. And last but not leastly, we're going to look at the causes and consequences of the Russian Revolution. But let's go ahead and dive right in. And let's talk about the causes of the First World War. Today you did a little bit of an activity with this, but I'm going to go into just a touch more detail about the broad general idea causes of World War I. First of all, it was nationalism. Nationalism is pride in your country. And what had evolved in the early 1900s, in the early 20th century, was this intense pride in who you were as a country. Now, if you'll remember, Italy and Germany had their unification movements, and there was a lot of nationalism that existed in the 1800s. Well, the 19th century nationalism led into the 20th century nationalism, in that people were still very proud of their country and would support their country no matter what their country did. And we're going to see the consequences of that later. And that also led to an extreme sense of self-determination through people who did not have their own country. Imperialism. Countries were increasing in competition. They were competing for raw materials and natural resources in Africa. And what that led to was increased tensions throughout the world. Not only were tensions increased in Europe, but tensions were increased throughout the world. It's called the World War because fighting took place all around the world, and many countries were involved in it worldwide, including Australia, the Ottoman Empire. Fighting took place in Africa. And there is also some fighting that took place in in Latin America as well. Militarism. Militarism is the belief that your military makes you right. Might makes right. The stronger your military is, the more correct you are and the more ability you have to do that. It's also the idea that you solve your problems through military action. Well, two countries, Germany and Britain, were the main proponents of this. Germany was trying to compete with Britain. Britain had the largest navy in the world, obviously because they had the most colonies. They had to protect all of those massive amounts of colonies. And so Germany was like, that's not fair. And so we're going to begin to build up our navy as well and get ours bigger as well. Last but not leastly was the existence of alliances in Europe. Europe was basically divided into two really hostile camps. Now, Otto von Bismarck, when he was head of the German state, prior to his dismissal, he had established a network of secret treaties and alliances. So outwardly, there were two treaties. There was this Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente, which started out as the Dual Entente. Well, that system of alliances was initially what kept Europe safe, the secret alliances by Bismarck. But once Bismarck was fired by Kaiser William II, what was left were two hostile states or two hostile treaties that did not really like each other. So the Triple Alliance consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Now, Italy is a different color here because they change sides when the war begins. These are defensive alliances, which essentially say that if your country is attacked, these other guys will support you. Well, Germany and Austria and Hungary were in that Triple Alliance. Well, the Triple Entente was made up of Russia, France, and Britain. Originally, it was called the Dual Entente. It was made up of France and Russia. But later on, Britain joined that alliance as well. And last but not leastly, last alliance was something called Pan-Slavism. Pan-Slavism means that all Slavic peoples should be united under one leader. Now, Slavs are an ethnic group in Europe. They're primarily found in Eastern Europe and in Southeastern Europe. Russia considered themselves the leader of the Pan-Slavic movement because they were the largest and strongest nation of Slavic people. Okay? And so they said, we are the supporters here. And that means that they support the Balkans in their search for independence and self-determination. And they specifically support Serbia in their attempt for independence. Okay? So let's talk about the exploding keg and what happens. On June 28, 1914, Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated. Now, Franz Ferdinand is the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary. That means he is going to become the king of Austria-Hungary. Now, Gavrilo Princip is a terrorist. Okay, he's a member of a terrorist organization named the Black Hand. And so Franz Ferdinand is traveling through Sarajevo, and he is assassinated by this guy. And so Austria-Hungary is really angered by this. Obviously, the heir to their throne, the person that's going to become their next leader, is assassinated, and so they're pretty ticked off. And so what happens, and 2 days later, on June 30th, Kaiser William II of Germany says, hey, Austria, we got your back. You can do whatever you want to Serbia to extract revenge. They believe Serbia was behind the assassination. The government was. Now, there's no doubt that Gavrilo Princip was a Serb and that they supported independence, okay? But the issue here was that the Serbian government didn't actually sanction it. Now, the blank check said, all right, Austria-Hungary, we're going to tell you, you can do whatever you want. Think about a blank check that your parents give you. If they leave it blank, you can write whatever amount on it. And if they don't write it to your name, to a specific person rather, you can fill it out for whatever you want and take a lot of money. And so Kaiser William II gave them this check and said, all right, you guys do whatever you need to, Austria, to take out revenge and exact revenge on Serbia. Well, here's what they came to. On July 23rd, Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia. And here's what they said. An ultimatum is basically a statement that says, you do this or else bad things are going to happen. So here's what it said. There were 4 main points of the ultimatum. 1, no propaganda. What this meant was that the Serbian government could not issue propaganda against Austria-Hungary. If they saw it, they had to ban it. Okay, they had to ban it immediately. They could not speak out against Serbian or against the Austro-Hungarian government. Also going along, no teachers in the schools. They could not negatively discuss Austria-Hungary. They couldn't say Austria-Hungary was bad. Austria-Hungary should give us their independence. They couldn't teach what they wanted. Okay. Third leg of the ultimatum was that no officials could speak out. No Serbian officials, government officials could speak out against Austria-Hungary. Now, Serbia had no problem with all of this. They accepted all 3 of those terms of the ultimatum. They said, okay, we'll take that. That's fine. What they did not accept and what they did not like was that there would be no fair trial for Gavrilo Princip. And here's what fair trial meant. The Austro-Hungarians wanted to take the trial, and the Austro-Hungarians wanted to put him on trial in the capital of Austria-Hungary. They wanted to take him to Vienna and put him on trial. Well, that's not very fair because he's not going to get a fair trial there because the Austrians are going to obviously think that he was part of a conspiracy and that the Serbian government was part of it. And so what the Serbians wanted was they wanted a neutral court to try him, put him on trial. It's similar to trying terrorists, people accused of attacking New York on 9/11 to having those trials in New York. You're not going to get a fair trial with that. It's just not going to happen. Well, so Serbia accepted all of those points, but they denied or declined the last point, no fair trial, and that led to bad things because the Austrians were not in a mood to negotiate. So here's what happened. Armies began to mobilize. They rejected those 2 points, and on July 29th, let me get my date right. Yeah, on July 28th, Austria rejected. Okay, and Serbia rejected the ultimatum, that final part, and they declared war on Austria. Okay, because they knew the Austrians would not accept it. And so as they were preparing for this, Russia began mobilizing her army to support Serbia. Okay, so now Russia's mobilizing her army and war is declared between Serbia and Austria on July 28th. Well, Russia starts mobilizing her army. And what that means is getting her army ready to fight. Now, the Russian army was getting ready to fight against Austria, and they told the Germans this, but the way that their mobilization or preparation to fight went was that they also mobilized their army along the German border. And Germany was like, dude, what are you doing? You can't do this. You can't get your army ready to fight us. And so Germany had had enough. Even though Russia said, no, we're not going to declare war on you, Germany said, yeah, forget that. We're going to declare a war on you. And Germany then declares war on Russia because they were mobilizing on August the 1st. So now, we've got 4 countries in war. Serbia and Austria have declared war on each other, and Germany has declared war on Russia on August 1st. Well, at the same time, on August 1st, Germany also declares war on France because, if you'll remember, they were aligned with Russia. Now, here's where things get hairy. Now, everybody else is neutral in the war, but here's what happened. Britain enters the war a couple of days later. Britain enters the war on August 4th because Germany invaded France through Belgium, which violated the Treaty of Belgium in 1823, which declared that Belgium was neutral. So Germany invades France through Belgium, who was supposed to be neutral, and Germany violates their neutrality, and Britain says, well, because we support Belgium, we now declare war on France, or on Russia, Germany. Britain declares war on Germany on August 4th. So now they're into war together. Well, now what you see is basically the rest of the world picking sides. So now we've got Russia, France, and Britain all in war against Germany and Austria. Okay, you've also got Serbia, who's kind of a minor player. So those countries are at war. What happens now is the rest of the world begins to pick sides. All right, who are we going to team up with? Well, the next group to pick sides is Japan. Japan declares war on Austria-Hungary and Germany on August 23rd. They did this for two reasons. First of all, they had a treaty with Britain that supported them. Okay, but they also, the second reason that the Japanese declared war was that they were actually hoping to gain some German possessions in the war. They also thought that maybe if Russia lost some, they might be able to get a piece of the Russian lands as well. But they were focused on getting German possessions in the Pacific that Germany held. So Japan enters on August 23rd. Italy, all this time, is remaining neutral. Italy, remember, was a member of the Triple Alliance, but they declared their neutrality as soon as Germany and Austria-Hungary began declaring war because that was a defensive treaty. Well, in the spring of 1915, Italy switches sides because they had a secret agreement with Britain, and Italy switches sides, and then they begin to fight on the side of the group that we'll call the Allies. So now it's Italy, Japan, Britain, France, and Russia fighting against Germany and Austria-Hungary. Now you're probably thinking, whoa, Germany and Austria-Hungary are going to get wiped out on this. But wait, another country enters in. The Ottoman Empire begins entering into war pretty much as soon as it starts. But they don't actually formally declare war until 1950. Now, here's what happens, and here's why the Ottoman Empire enters the war. The Ottoman Empire, if you'll remember, had lost a lot of ground, or if you'll think, had lost a lot of ground to independence movements in Greece, to Austria-Hungary, to a little bit of land to Austria-Hungary, and to other countries forming independent nations in the Balkan Peninsula. Well, Ottoman Empire was hoping to gain those lands back, but Germany was interested because Ottoman Empire controlled something very valuable that had become of really important use in the early 20th century, and that's oil. They knew that the Middle East contained oil reserves, and so they were hoping to be able to get land in the Middle East and free up oil supplies to run all their new machines and weapons and cars and tanks and things like that. So now here are the two sides. We've got Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire. Bulgaria also joins in, hoping to gain land. Okay, against Britain, Belgium, Japan, Italy, France, and Russia. So now we've got two big sides. The world is at war, and we'll talk about the first round of that war tomorrow.